All right, welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody. We're in a much different setting today.
Yeah, it's like between the two ferns episode.
Yeah, but it's one in between us. It's kind of the opposite.
Is that my plant?
Yes. We had to shift some stuff around, all right?
Oh my goodness.
Conference rooms are in use, so we had to
Between the
move.
snake plant. Yeah. Or the snake plant.
You
between-
didn't notice it left your office, so that's the worst part.
Nah, I had no idea actually. Are you watering it?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So anyways, we wanted to continue, the conversations between you and I just about more specifically around sales and, what we're doing from a sales perspective, what we see working in the industry from a sales perspective, and kind of focusing on a topic as it relates to sales process, so that everybody can get out and utilize some of those things that we're learning. So what we thought we'd focus on today, right, was centers of influence. Mm-hmm. That's a term used in the industry for referral sources, essentially. We can get into that a little bit more specifically, but essentially having a strategy around getting referrals through centers of influence. It is a strategy, right, to go and do it. It takes a consistent model strategy to go do that, to build those relationships, and that's what we want to go through today. So first, though, what's your definition of a COI?
That's a great question because I think people define it differently.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people are to the point where they hear, COI and they just roll their eyes.
Yeah.
It's like it's a worn down topic to go get new business. I feel like. We define them inside our firm as advocates of our firm, right? Which starts to change the way that we think about COIs and how we develop them and cultivate them to get referrals from, and which is much different than I would maybe say this is more of a traditional way of thinking around a COI where, we're looking for introductions into different businesses or to different people.
Yeah. I think advocates is a great term because essentially you want these people, because it doesn't have to be the traditional sense either where it's like, oh, it needs to be a banker or a mortgage broker or a attorney. Those could be certainly great COI sources, but could be much broader than that. And essentially, when you think of the term advocate, it's somebody that believes in what you're doing and in your model and the value you're bringing to clients such that they want to advocate that on your behalf to other people that might benefit from that, right? And so I also encourage people, think creatively about who those people can be, right? So it doesn't have to be, again, those people in those trusted advisor roles. Those are great. But it could be, a golf course pro or something like that where somebody's just very connected and believes in what you're doing and would be trusted if they told somebody that, this person can help you with that problem, right? Somebody that's having a lot of those discussions.
Yeah.
But so then walk down that strategy a little bit further, right? Because if our strategy to go get these relationships is just, well, I'm going to, I'll take these guys out to coffee once every quarter or, buy them a lunch here and there, certainly they're going to know your name, but are they going to be able to advocate your story on your behalf?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you got to start there, right? So you have to understand how you're going to define advocate. And the only way that somebody can really be an advocate for you is to deeply understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's why some of the traditional strategies that I hear people go implement, like, taking a prospect to lunch or a potential COI, prospective COI to lunch and, telling them about what you do and asking them if they would keep you in mind next time they run across a case that you might be a fit for. Like, again, that's down the introduction route, which it can work.
Yeah.
But you have to have a lot more at-bats versus really focusing on a COI that you might have synergy with, which we'll get to here in a second, and then having them be advocates. They really have to understand what you do and how you do it. So we talk about how going to lunch or, whatever the more traditional strategies are, just don't cut it. You really need to bring the COI through your process, just like they would become a client if they're not, and educate them in a deep fashion over a period of time about what you do and how you do it.
Yeah.
So that when you're, they're sitting out in front of somebody who has a need, they can gather from that COI that there's passion there for the organization, that it's not just an introduction, but it's a strong recommendation that they go and talk to you and enter your process. They can describe what they're going to experience as they walk through the process, etc. Like, that's a much different thing than, hey, yeah, no problem, I'll shoot you an email intro to Elliot.
Yeah. Well, and taking a step back to what you've said at the start is, we've all been there where we get a referral from a COI and we just go, ugh, why is he sending me this? Or why is she telling people, this person, that they should do business with us? Because it's just not your target market.
Yeah.
It's not somebody you want to do business with. It doesn't fit, what you can do for them. We've all been there. But the reason for that is that COI doesn't understand you well enough, your value prop well enough, and who you're targeting well enough to appropriately recommend you to the people that you need to talk to.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of what you're talking about.
Well, it's certainly another slice. The only way that they're going to get to be able to advocate for you is if they know who could be a fit. So going through the process like we talked about, but then deeply understanding who you can provide the most value to is another key component.
Yeah. And in order to do that, you have to understand who you can provide the most value to.
For sure.
Separate story or separate conversation for another day, but obviously you need to understand who your target client is, the value you can bring them, and be able to articulate that to the COI, right? So get a little bit more tactical with that, because there are certain strategies that you can use to walk that COI through that process. And I want to make sure everybody understands this is not a one lunch type of a conversation, right? It's a multifaceted, meeting and conversation type of engagement where you're getting so deep with that COI that they understand exactly what you're going to bring to a client if they recommend somebody to you, right? So talk a little bit more tactical about how you do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all around vetting who they are and what they do, and getting to understand them on a deep level first. All right, so if you're reaching out to them, it's very difficult to reach out to you, Elliot, and be like, hey, will you deeply understand my process so that you can refer me business? That's pretty tricky, right?
Yeah.
So it's all around, implementing your sales process that you use on a day in and day out basis to build a relationship with that COI. So, you got to go out and you got to have more of a high level conversation and get to know them and what they do really well. And, after that, you can continue to build on that and bring those, bring your relationship closer to a point where you can ask them to say, hey, you know what? I feel like there's some synergy here. I think we could do some things together. Would you mind walking through our process now that we've learned a little bit about yours, and then start to walk them through yours, where they can start to get a deeper understanding of what you do.
Yeah. Well, I think that's key in so many different areas too, because the best way to get a referral is to give a referral, right? And so if you understand their process, who they're going after, who they're targeting, and can give them solid referrals, it's going to be the best way for them to reciprocate that referrals, which is ultimately what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah. In a lot of cases, it doesn't always have to be like that. I do think that stops a lot of folks from going out and trying it because they're just so focused on creating this reciprocal relationship that just might not exist yet, or you haven't quite found the angle. But you know, they're a good human, and you know, they really like what you do. They don't know anybody else like you in your space. Like, there's still potential there. But certainly the most fruitful are ones where you can reciprocate. And just think about that from a unique standpoint.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point too, because I think just thinking about it in terms of value as well is important. You know, if they're making a recommendation to somebody to talk to you, and you do such a good job for that person that it creates so much value, there's value back to your COI because they made that recommendation.
100%.
Right, and especially if they're in a close industry where your clients are similar and they might need help from an insurance perspective or whatnot. Like, there can be a lot of value there, and even if you're not reciprocating with a referral, you're reciprocating by giving them value back to their client.
Yeah.
You know, and that can be just as, if not more important.
Yeah, or simply making them look good.
Yeah.
Making the other advisor that, you know, referred you the piece of business look great.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of value to that. And don't screw it up. Like, I don't need another referral back. Just don't mess the thing up
that's
and
true.
make me look good. You know, and so it can be positioned a lot of different ways.
Yeah. How do you recommend, like, identifying those COIs that, you know, you want to go try to build a relationship with?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think there's the obvious answers that are close to, you know, 1 or 2 degrees away from what you do, or, you know, that operate in or around where your target market prospects are. And then there are the ones that are more, you know, unique and out of the box. Like you mentioned, Golf Pro, right?
Yeah.
In our space. And, you know, it's like on the surface, it would be fairly difficult to try to figure out how to reciprocate that, you know? But...
Get some golf lessons?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I need those, but, you know, different topic.
That's true. So anyway, you know, you can think about it from a more unique standpoint, and over time start to figure out an angle on some of those. And that's where we found some of the, some people have just created amazing COIs because of their ability to think outside of the box and figure out how to reciprocate in a very unique way to a unique COI that, you know, it doesn't always have to be the CPA or the attorney and whatnot.
Yeah, I definitely think that gets limited a lot in these conversations, because we always think about the CPA and the banker and you can name off the 5 or whatever it is, right? And those, at the end of the day, though, that doesn't say we shouldn't build those relationships. We should, absolutely. But I think one of the best ways to figure out who you should get to know in this capacity is talk to your clients, right? They're a wealth of knowledge for the things that they value and what other clients like them might value, and that's in their relationships as well. You know, so who are trusted advisors in your organization, client? You know, who are the people that you wouldn't want to live without as it pertains to running your business? You know, having those types of discussions and questions and getting that list and keeping that over time, and then take those folks out. You're going to figure out some of them you don't really want to know. You don't think that there's synergy there. But then some of them you're going to say, okay, I think that there's opportunity here for us to work together. And then you take them through your strategy or your process, as we've talked about, right? But that can be a great way to find a lot of those types of COIs. Again, through your core clients who you want to replicate.
Yeah, who they trust, and then take it deeper than that and start asking, how they engage in certain processes that they do on a day in and day out basis, and who they interact with. And there's a lot of times, we've talked about this and have had them on the podcast when we chatted around getting referrals from mortgage brokers, right? Because there's a point in the process where there's a need, and there's a direct incentive for the mortgage broker to have insurance in place so that they can get the deal done.
Yeah.
So like those examples exist throughout a bunch of different processes that your clients interact with on a day in and day out basis.
Yeah. So is that something that you actively search out? Do you actively like try to find those areas that that exists in, or is that something that you naturally comes through? You get a call from a mortgage broker that's like, "Hey, I need help here. Can you help?" Or both.
Well, I would certainly be open-minded to those angles, but yeah, I think it can be more effective and impactful if you can have a strategy around it.
Yeah, I agree.
And start to define it a little bit more. Yeah.
Well, I think we all, or we should have prospecting strategies, right? And a lot of folks have or know, I'm going to make so many cold calls, or I'm going to do so many reach outs or marketing or whatever. And this is no different at the end of the day. You should have a strategy around how you're going to build these relationships if this is an avenue that you're looking at to go down to drive referrals. And thinking about it through that lens makes you sit down and say, okay, maybe I have one of these people right now that's working really. What's working there? And then how can I create a system around that to replicate it over the course of time? And I think, like you mentioned, maybe we dive a little bit deeper on that, but it's important to put the focus on them at the first part of that, right? Of this process, then shifting to focus being on you, your process, your value. Go a little bit deeper on that, because I think there's some nuances in there that are important, like getting that COI to your office, or to come to you type of thing, so you can show them what a client or a prospect might be experiencing. Little things like that talk through a little bit more specifically that people may not be thinking about as it relates to a COI strategy.
Yeah. So, I think this all comes fairly naturally if you can implement a sweet sales process with them up front, right? And what I mean by that is, like, you really got to take some time and take it slow and develop a genuine relationship with them, like care deeply about what they do and how they do it. And as I mentioned before, you can implement your own sales process to be able to do that. We obviously have ours that we've talked about, but it's essentially what it is you're going into that initial meeting and you're talking higher level, and just it's more of a get to know you type conversation, and you're getting to know them. And if that's natural and conversational, which it should be, like, they're going to naturally be inquisitive about you.
Yeah.
So that the next time you go back into their office and you start diving a little bit deeper, again, by asking good questions about their process and how you might be able to help them, after that meeting, it's usually very natural for them to start asking, like, well, what do you do, and how can I help you? Like, if you have a genuine interest in trying to help me, how can I help you?
Yeah. And
that's a good test too, to know that you're at the point to be able to pitch, if you will, that why don't you come over to my office next meeting? And there is some psychology around that that's very important. And come into my office the next meeting and let's sit down and we'll take you through our process. But you mentioned something earlier that made me think about this as well. How many COIs do you need? And I think if they're introduction COIs, you can't have enough of them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you need 150
Yeah.
or so. You know,
Or so.
if they're advocates, you might need 3.
Yeah. That's a great point.
So, you know, if they have the ability to get 2 or 3 names on your desk every week because they truly believe in what you're doing and they're out having conversations and they're saying, hey, you need to go talk to Elliot. And not just, hey, you need to go talk to Elliot, but, you know, here's why, here's what you're going to experience, here's the value that they can add to you. Like, it's really a no-lose situation. Just go have a conversation with them. You're out an hour, and if you don't like it, then you're better educated anyway. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you don't need a lot. You need, and that allows you to invest more time. Because I think a lot of people listening, and certainly when we first started doing this, it's like, holy shit, like how much time do I need to spend?
Yeah.
And what do I need to do? Point. And it's going to take me a year. And it's like, yeah, it's going to take you a year. We're not building introduction relationships.
Yeah. No, I think that is spot on. And you also don't necessarily want that amount of advocates at the end of the day. I mean, obviously you want to be getting enough prospects to allow you to hit your goals, right? But I think the end point there that you were making about you want to be able to spend the right amount of time with those that are advocating for you. And, you know, you just can't do that. You get to a certain threshold, right? To be able to nurture those relationships the right way and enough so that those continue. If you have too many of those people you're trying to nurture, the quality of that's going to go down, and they're going to start to naturally send you less people to talk to.
For sure. You got to keep the experience up. And look, there's some obvious things that we're just glazing over that have to exist, right? Like, you need to know your value proposition, and there has to be one, right?
Yeah.
Like, to create an advocate, somewhere along the line, they're going to say, you know, what do you do that everyone else doesn't do?
Yeah. And it needs to be simple too.
Why you? Yeah. You gotta be able to wade through that stuff. But, you know, you gotta know who, you gotta have a process.
Yep.
And you got to be able to bring them through that process and be intentional. And you got to keep your experience up. You got to deliver on your reputation. You know, things like that are all important in this strategy. But, you know, if you're already out winning business, think about why, if you don't know why. And then use that, you know, use that material to go out and help develop your COIs.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. One of the things that I think is important as well that I want you to hit on is how important is it to be dialed in on after you get the referral, the communication back to the COI, right? A lot of times I think, you know, they call us up and say, hey, I've got Joe, needs some help with this, Ryan. I want to send him your way. Great, thanks. Sends Joe your way, and then you just never talk to him, or you know, you don't communicate back to him about where you're at in that process with Joe. I think that's such an important and underutilized part of your COI strategy, because you don't want that COI ever thinking like, I wonder whatever happened with that. Like, hope they did a good job. I guess no news is good news. You know, you want to keep them up to speed on almost every step of the process. Hey, I really appreciate you sending Joe over. I had a great first conversation with him. I think we're going to be able to help him. I'll keep you in the loop as that moves forward. And then, you know, you have the next meeting and it's like, hey man, wanted to let you know, we're going to put some stuff in place for Joe, help him with this and this. Great. Again, I appreciate that referral over, because you're controlling the fact that COI knows you provided value to Joe. Yeah. Right? Don't assume that Joe's going to tell them that, or that they're going to hear that, or that they're in contact with that person regularly, you know? So you want to make sure that you're communicating that back such that COI knows you did what they sent them to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're exactly right. So that's step number 1, is keep them in the loop. But the best thing that you can do is get that prospect to provide feedback to the COI.
Oh, yeah.
Through
how do you do that?
Well, number 1, by delivering.
Doing a good job.
Yeah, you gotta if you're providing outstanding work, and they're having a truly good experience, like they're highly likely to do that. Mm-hmm. But there's natural places in the process too to be able to encourage them to reach back out to the COI and just like thank them for sending them your way and whatnot. And if they can hear that, that's a huge deal. The other little trick that you can use is what we call third-party compliments, and all you're doing there is just complimenting the COI to the prospect.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. And, if you do that enough times throughout the process, it's likely that one of them is going to get back and hit the COI's ears, and that also is good. Mm-hmm. So those are two kind of not so obvious just tips for, keeping that COI greased and making sure that they're happy with what happened with their prospect.
Yeah. So then one of the things that we run into a lot, how do you handle the conversation when COI sends you somebody you don't want to do business with? Because that can be a tricky conversation. And what I think I hear from a lot of folks is like, well, when I get that referral, you feel obligated to work on the piece of business because your COI sent you a referral.
Well, hopefully that doesn't happen first.
I understand that,
because, if you have an advocate that understands who you're best able to serve, hopefully it limits the misses significantly, right? But to me, this is a much harder problem to solve if you have an introduction COI. Because they don't know.
Yeah.
Right? If they're an advocate COI and the advocate just misses once, it's very easy for you to pick up the phone and be like, hey, Elliot, do you remember when we were having this conversation in my office about, who we are best able to go serve? And, this feels a little direct with me talking through it right now, but, this is the gist, right? It in essence, gives you a hook to go back to in the conversation and explain to them who we're looking for and why.
Yeah.
And reminding them. That's a much easier conversation than going back to an introduction COI and having to educate them on why they just sent over a bad referral.
Yeah.
Right? You almost don't do it. You're almost just like, hey, something popped up or whatnot, and, they went another direction, but please send me the next one you got.
Yeah.
Like, that's way more awkward.
Oh, 100%.
Than having an advocate COI and being able to go back and just have an honest conversation. Because depending on where the relationship is, if it's in a good spot with the COI, you're able to sit down with them and say, hey, we're trying to work on referring business back and forth to each other. Like, let's talk for 30 minutes on how we might be able to get more effective at doing that.
Yeah.
Do you remember that one that you sent me? Like, this was going on and that was going on. It probably wasn't quite the right fit, but next time, if you run across this or that, we might be able to provide them more value.
Yeah.
That's completely different. So I think it answers itself by just going deeper with the COI and making them advocates.
Yeah, I think it's spot on. I mean, if you've had that conversation, you can always reflect back on it, so that they're reminded of who you can do business with. But I think it's also being honest with not only yourself, the client or prospect, and then that COI, that there is a specific type of client that you can help best, right? And I think because we might sell insurance and everybody has to buy insurance, we feel like we should be able to, or have a product for everybody. When in reality, if we're doing things right, we should set up our models such that we're helping, or we have a very defined model to help a certain type of client. And some clients don't fit that mold, right? And we're going to have to say no. But you got to be honest with yourself when and if that COI sends one of those over, and just say, hey, this is just a little bit outside of our bailiwick, and everything you just mentioned, walk back through that conversation. But it's so key. I mean, I think people want to grab on to every single one of those because it's an opportunity and it's revenue and I got to hit my goals and all the stuff. But I think being honest with yourself about who you're going to target, who you can bring value to is so important.
Yeah.
What did we miss in this conversation, Ryan, about COIs, using that as a strategy to grow, et cetera?
Just don't let them die. If you can,
Don't let them die.
yeah.
I don't want anybody to die.
Well, let me phrase it differently.
Yeah, that might be good.
Don't let the COI like fall out of touch.
Ah,
Is that better?
yeah, got it now.
I started going down the road of fall of, and then I was like, shit, here we go again. All right. Don't let them fall out of the process.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so much work to get them to become an advocate. Like, they might not have a scenario for a bit. So you got to deploy your relationship skills and capabilities to keep that drip going with them, right? And keep that relationship hot with them so that, all the hard work that you just put into making them become an advocate just doesn't dry up. So I'd say that's one of the, these things don't start off hot, or they might start off hot and then fall off quick. So it's super important that you stay engaged and continue to provide them value in different ways that we should be familiar with through prospecting to, keep top of mind and continue to work on it.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Well, hopefully everybody took a lot of good stuff out of that. It's definitely a strategy we found successful and I think can be replicated. So with that, we will sign off this week and see everybody next week, right?
All right.
Thanks, man.
See ya.